rather, the Gnostic book, the secret book of John. This is about spirit. Begins with spirit being unification, spirit unifying. So in our last presentation, we discussed the fount of spirit flowing out of the living water of light. And remember, the fount is desire. It's a need. It's desire is what it talks about, is what it is. And what is the one thing that spirit desires? Desires life, desires experience, that experience of life. In our last presentation, emotion and intelligence came together. And now we shall discover what happens. It, meaning spirit, understood its own image when it saw it in the pure water of light, which surrounds it. And its thought became operative and revealed itself. Light and water, light meaning intelligence, water being emotion, but in their mundane aspects, both of them are required to sustain life. We need water, we need light. We draw sustenance from both of those. In our facets of healing class that was earlier in the day, we talked about how the body finds nourishment through food, through light, through water, through information, through the various fields of the earth. We draw sustenance from that. But here we're talking about light and water. And in their esoteric states, intelligence and emotion, these two sustain life. They are integral to life. So what we discovered is that intelligence alone is lacking. Emotion alone is lacking. When we encounter those people who pride themselves on their intellect, their intelligence, we often find them to be cold, distant. And when we encounter those people who seem to operate on emotions, they tend to be impulsive and confused a lot of the time. So, and in both instances, these people, those who are not only intellect and those who are only emotion, they tend to be oblivious of themselves and of others because they lack understanding of the other. The intellect lacks understanding of the emotion, and emotion lacks understanding of the intellect. Without that understanding, the two they're impotent. But when these two qualities, intelligence and emotion, come together, science would call that emotional intelligence. But what we find with that is the blending, the intermingling of the male and female energies, because intelligence acts upon emotion, and when they come together, they become something else. And Emotion also acts upon intelligence. We know this from the Hermetic principle of polarities. One possesses its opposing qualities. And it's when these opposing qualities come together that something wonderful occurs. So in this instance, we are taking the pure water of light and we are blending the qualities of emotion and of intelligence. And when this happens, we are able to act responsibly. And not only that, but most importantly, we discover that we have potential. Through awareness, we become receptive of ourselves. And that is an important thing because there are two realities that we experience as we move through this life. There is the outer reality, and then there is the inner reality. The inner reality has more influence over us than the outer reality. We may think otherwise, but when we talked about our self-esteem, our self-image, self-confidence, all of that is the self. And where do we experience the self? We experience the self inside. And that is what influences our perspective of life, our experience of life. Because if we are not satisfied with ourselves, it affects everything out here, even more so. So when the two come together, we become receptive to ourselves. And it's through this receptive aspect that we are able to act upon ourselves because we have to. If we do not act upon ourselves, we become lost in self-pity. Becoming aware of ourselves, becoming aware of our potential, beginning to act responsibly means that we are no longer isolated within the inner reality. We are beginning to take the two realities and bring them together. But most of the time, they're not separated. Most of the time, they're in various stages of interception, various stages. There are those who spend their existence within themselves. I'm not talking about those in the mental hospitals. I'm talking about those who are caught up in their emotions, those who are self-critical, those who take what happens out here and brings it inside. Those people who have marginalized themselves, they've done that because they are caught within the inner reality. Yes, they're walking through the outer reality. Yes, they're interacting with you and I, but they're caught in here because everything that happens outside is internalized, and that is coloring their view, their perception. And at the same time, those people who are caught on the outside, we call them arrogant. I don't want to say sociopaths because sociopaths are typically operating at a disability because they don't comprehend emotions. Because they don't comprehend emotions, they don't express them. They express an artificial sense of emotion because they don't understand them. They are operating at a disability. So when we're able to bring these two realities together, something else occurs, but we're not there yet. So she meaning Barbelo, stood before it, Spirit, out of the splendor of the light, which is the power which is before the all, the power which has revealed itself and is the perfect forethought of the universe, the light, the copy of light, the image of the invisible. These last two are important, and we'll come to that in a moment. But she, Barbelo, she stood before Spirit. She, not he, as we are taught. In the mundane teachings, it's always he, but it is not, because we are moving in two different directions. The mundane move in one direction and the esoteric move in another direction. They're essentially moving in the same direction, but different, relatively different positions from the center. It's like the moon, the waxing and the waning. You've got the moon that's waxing towards the full moon, but it's also waning from the new moon. And then it reaches the height, and then from there it begins to wane from the full moon, but it is waxing towards the new moon. See, growth and decay, both taking place at the same time, part of the same operation. So she stood before Spirit. Like I said, she, not he. Spirit had acted upon itself to create something receptive to its influence. Spirit acted upon itself to create something that would be receptive to its influence. It's a bit difficult to understand, at least from this perspective, but if we're coming from the other perspective, it makes perfect sense. But the thing to keep in mind is Spirit is androgynous. It is both male and female. Therefore, it acts upon itself. It is receptive to itself. That's the direction we're moving towards, is to become androgynous, if not physically, but internally, to become both receptive or initiator and completion. Initiate and completion. There's the mystery between that we move through. So there's nothing about authority here, only influence. The female aspect is all about being receptive, being influenced. And that is what is happening. Because remember, Spirit unifies. Spirit takes everything and brings it together. The life experience brings everything to the moment, unifies it in that moment. That is its nature. So she came forth when certain qualities of light and water, intelligence and emotion, came together and intermingled. She was birthed, in a sense. Now we see this mixture in a variety of writings, a variety of religious writings, a variety of occult writings. So looking at Adolf Frank's, the Kabbalah, we find it. I believe we discussed it in our last meeting here, our last presentation. This is the germ. This is the mist that moves over the earth that's written of in Genesis. This is spirit moving over the earth. It's not about form. It's not about this. It's not about creating the world. It is that germ that exists within, that first awakening. That's what it's in reference to. It's that first moment when you realize, you stop and you look around and you realize that life, your experience, is lacking. It's lacking because you are asleep to what's all around you, asleep to the moment, because there's only one thing to be aware of, and that's the present. And when you're aware of the present, you are naturally aware of the past and of the future. You're aware of all. It's difficult to grasp, but it's at this point where the female energy is at its height. It's where it's at its most importance, because it's at this point when this germ takes root, this seed begins to open up. It's at this point that our awareness truly begins, that we begin to see the world in a different light. It's when we awaken that we begin to act upon ourselves. We call it self-improvement, but it's acting upon ourselves. You become dissatisfied with your life. You become dissatisfied with where you're at. In order to change that, you have to act upon yourself. So you have to become receptive to yourself. This is the high priestess of the Tarot before she becomes embodied in the Empress. This is the mystery. This is the act of completion, receptivity. To receive is you complete what was initiated. You accept. That's the thing. You accept. When you accept, you receive. That is the female energy. You are accepting. And when you accept, you begin to see. Because keep in mind what it said. This is the perfect power. She is the perfect power, the perfect forethought. Power is the ability to influence. She is the perfect influence because she is acting, she is influencing upon herself. The perfect influence is when we act upon ourselves. She's the perfect blending of intelligence and emotion. She is the forethought of light. Forethought, that's wisdom. Consideration, it's wisdom. She is the wisdom of the light. She is the intelligence blended with emotion. She is the copy of the light. She is the copy, the image of the invisible. This is key. This is very, very important. You may not see this yet, but you will. Consider this. This might be a little scary here, but what's just been described is ourselves. You may not want to accept that. That's fine. But it's all about us becoming aware of ourselves. in such a way that we see ourselves as being of the light. We accept that we are copies of the light. We accept that we are an image of the invisible. We are reflections of the light, of wisdom, of intelligence. This is not something many are willing to admit to. For instance, I walked into a chapel one time and I said, Jesus has arrived. Well, needless to say, the looks that I received were not very pleasing. But I refer you to the Gospel of John, where Jesus is trying to teach his disciples. He said, when you look upon me, you see the Father. The Father is in me, and I am in you. That is what he was relating to them. This is what he was relating to them. So it's something for you to consider. Okay, we can only introduce thoughts and ideas. That's as far as we can go. The rest is up to you. We cannot apply our views or perceptions upon you. We cannot do that because we learned earlier that there are none before the light. There are none that came before the light. There are none to differentiate the light. We cannot do this. We can present, and that's it. It all comes down to you. Each of us may choose a conclusion based on the information we provide, but it is your own understanding that you must abide by. We claim to be the children of God. If this is true, then we are copies of the image of the invisible. We are images of the invisible. We are copies of the light, regardless of what path we may be moving along. I want to thank you for allowing me to share that. We are moving into the donation portion of our service. If you find any of our presentations of value, please give generously. You may donate through our website. If you have the PayPal app, you can scan the code. You can drop a donation in the mail to us. The information is available at our website. Please avail yourself of it. It is BRDNSKY, birdinsky.com. You'll find all the information there.